Can you confirm that if there is no agreement reached, which is approved by Parliament on Saturday, that by the end of the day the Prime Minister will write the letter that he is required to send by the European Union Withdrawal Number 2 Act?
Well, I can confirm, as the Prime Minister has repeatedly set out, that firstly the government will comply with the law, and secondly it will comply with undertakings given to the court in respect of the law.
Well, the undertaking given to the court was that, subject to section 1.5, in the event that neither of the conditions set out in sections 1.1 and 1.2 is satisfied, he will send a letter in the form set out in the schedule. Can you confirm for the committee, as the Secretary of State, that in those circumstances he will send the letter?
I confirm that the government will abide by what is set out in that letter.
Which will involve sending a letter, is that right?
That's you read it out, and I refer back to that text.
Well, that's hopeful that you have confirmed that he will send that letter. Do you know why the Prime Minister spent so long saying that he wouldn't?
Well, we're committed to leaving, as you know, Mr Benn, on the 31st of October. We think the best way of doing that is with a deal, to leave in a smooth and orderly way. That is why the team are, as we speak, involved in intensive negotiations to do that. We think there's a political will on both sides to do that, and that is the best way, in our view, of meeting the legislation requirements that you set out.
Okay, but if the Prime Minister sends the letter, and he's promised to do that, and you confirm that, and if an extension to the 31st of January is offered, he has promised to accept it, because that's what the court in Scotland was told. Can you explain then how the UK is going to leave the EU on the 31st of October? Because the two things don't square, do they?
Well, I think there's a number of, to quote the Speaker, we'll cross that bridge in due course, is the way the Speaker would usually put it. There's a number of variables that apply to what is a complex piece of legislation, but the first way of meeting the test that you have set out, Mr Benn, through your legislation, is to have a deal, and the full effort of government is focused on that. That is why I was in Luxembourg yesterday. It's why the technical team were in discussions past midnight UK time last night. It's why those discussions are ongoing as we speak, and we are absolutely committed to securing a deal. We think that is in the interest of both sides. Certainly I had 11 bilaterals with counterparts in Luxembourg yesterday. The consistent message in all of those bilateral meetings was a desire on the EU side to have a deal, and that is absolutely what we're focused on delivering.
I understand that entirely. I'm just trying to establish that if no agreement is reached and the Prime Minister sends the letter as he's promised to do and asks for the extension and the EU grants one to the 31st of January, then we can't leave on the 31st of October, can we?
You're, with respect, Chair, as is absolutely your right, but you're, I think, getting several steps ahead. I think the key issue before is are we able to reach an agreement that would satisfy the terms of your legislation if we do so. But these are issues for the House to determine in due course. But what is essential is we reach agreement with the EU, and then the question is whether that is deliverable within the UK Parliament, and that is the test on which we are focused. And I think the other issues which quite understandably you seek to lead me towards are issues for the future. The issue before us today, from a government point of view, is how do we deliver a deal and leave the EU in a smooth and orderly way, because the Prime Minister and the government is absolutely committed to leaving on the 31st of October.
Well, I can understand why you don't want to answer that question, as is your right, but perhaps we could move on.
Raise a point of order, if I may.
What's that?
I'm just wondering what we're doing here. I mean, you've had the floor now for 20 minutes. I doubt there's any other member will have the floor for 20 minutes during this discussion this morning. And I would welcome an opportunity for others to speak.
Yes, I mean, others will all
And you know, with respect, rather biased because you're pushing the Benn Act through, so I'd personally like to see the chair as well.
Well, your comments are noted.
Number one, how would you say the approach to negotiations has changed since the previous Prime Minister to now? How has your role changed and how has the approach changed?
Well, my role has changed insofar as previously I was much more focused on the preparation for no deal. That is now led by the Chancellor Duchy of Lancaster, who I know has given evidence to the committee on that issue, and my focus has been on the negotiations. So in terms of within government, there has been a change. I think from a government point of view, the change of approach, I would refer you back to the letter sent by the Prime Minister to President Tusk in the summer, which set out the changes that the Prime Minister was seeking to make to the deal. But as someone who served both Prime Ministers, what would I say? I would say both have shown an absolute commitment to securing a deal, and that is very much what is informing the current Prime Minister's approach.
Thank you, Minister. And just finally, do you believe the Benn Act has weakened the negotiating hand of the government in our country?
I think it has been unhelpful to the negotiations, absolutely. But I think what is recognised both in the EU and the UK is the time is now for a deal. I think there is, certainly reflected in the discussions I had yesterday, there is a desire to get a deal, a recognition that it is in both sides' interests to do so, and the teams are working extremely hard in order to take that forward.